So I just went to the UAR convention and I want to do a legal panel recap because there were so many things that I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So I want you guys to stay up here with us because here's the thing that's great. Do you guys want seats?
Yeah.
Here's the thing that's crazy about this is you guys, there was like a heated debate even in the room. Like there is a lot of questions on what is happening and where things are going and breaches. And so when they were even asking for questions for people of like, hey, what is happening within the contract or what do you guys think the ruling was on this? There was some debate even in the room on what the ruling was. And even the attorneys were having discussions with each other. Why? Because we're in a crazy market that we've never really seen before. And so people are doing some crazy things. So first of all,
there is an attorney that's usually on that panel that I completely disagree with most of the time.
But anyway, so first things first, and because we're gonna talk about the clarity. Do not get creative or overcomplicate your addendums and your contract. How is the best way to do this?
Look for a form.
Use the freaking forms. So right now, a couple of things that they're seeing the most issues on breach. Earnest money. Where is it deposited and who has it? Is there an addendum stating that? Your contract states, got a little copy of the contract right here. Also, if you haven't read your contract recently, going to go ahead and suggest from Amanda B. Mendenhall, an attorney, the realtor and Utah attorney, that she suggests perhaps you should read the contract like, I don't know, once a year, even if you think you know it really well. So number one, earnest money deposit. On this date, buyer offers to purchase from seller the property described below and agrees to deliver no later than 4 calendar days per acceptance as defined in section 23, earnest money deposit in the amount of X in the form of X after acceptance by buyer and seller and receipt of the earnest money by the brokerage. The brokerage shall have 4 calendar days in which to deposit earnest money into the brokerage real estate trust account. Interesting thing that what I think is new on this form, you notice I didn't say buyer's brokerage anywhere in that sentence. It just said brokerage. So do we need an addendum if as the buyer, it's going to be held at the seller's brokerage instead? The answer is no, but she said she would still clarify. If you are holding earnest money anywhere besides the brokerage, you must have an addendum. You must. If you're holding it at Amicus, if you're holding it at the seller's going to hold it, if you're holding it at the builder, wherever the earnest money is being held, you must have an addendum if it's anywhere other than the brokerage.
And I would argue that it has to be the buyer's brokerage. And the reason being is this is being written by the buyer, right? The buyer's side. And when you get down to the agent section and the agents, on the agent section on the buy side, your agent and your agent brokerage is who's writing it, and that's where it would circle back. That's where it would circle
back to, probably for a clarification. We think that this is something silly that they would be like, oh no, well, it doesn't really matter. Like we still deposited the earnest money. We just deposited it with the title company. So we still deposited the earnest money. The earnest money was there. The earnest money is available to close with. But guess what? A seller that wants to get out of a contract with your buyer, they want your buyer to default for whatever reason. This is a default point and it's happening all of the time. Okay, so earnest money deposits matter. There's a form for it. It's actually just called, it's crazy, deposit of earnest money with the title company addendum to the real estate purchase contract. It's very clear if you're holding it with the title company. If for some reason you're holding it anywhere else, I would probably copy whatever you can to have the exact verbiage out of here and say very clearly where it's going to be held. The biggest thing with breach of contracts right now are that people are not clear, and we can say, well, there wasn't a meeting of the minds, or it wasn't clear on exactly what was going to happen in that. So quit getting creative was basically the attorney's advice. They said, we're seeing, speaking of hug and kiss for earnest money, we're seeing all these crazy things. Be very clear with what that looks like and what the remedy is, because if the earnest money is a hug and a kiss, how are you going to remedy that in the event of default?
If I can, on earnest money too, one thing that is sort of my pet peeve, so if anyone uses it in here, just bear with me. Earnest money goes hard.
That's exactly, that was another clarification point.
You bring in coins instead of paper, or you bring in a wire instead of check. I don't know what hard means. I know, you know, we all know what it means, but in legalese, what does earnest money goes hard? What does that mean? Don't use that. Don't
It's
use
unclear.
weird terms. Non-refundable, to be immediately released or released on this date directly to the seller with this method or whatever it is. Don't use terms that are lingo essentially within the real estate industry, right? Like earnest money, hard earnest money. It's
So
not-
before we move on past this, what you just showed with so we, last week,
addendum or the
yeah, we had we represent the seller. We had an accepted offer. I don't know, 3, 4, 5 days later, the agent sent over this addendum saying, oh, we're going to deposit it with the title company. And our agent's like,
No, we're not.
well, no, we're not.
Nope.
They should have already accepted it. We don't even really want to deal with this buyer at this point because they've already, after we got everything accepted and they knocked all the other buyers out, now they're being a little shady. And this was one of the reasons. Now, does it make the contract void?
No, but.
Makes it voidable.
Mhm.
Okay, so I told her, and I'm not gonna say her name, but I told her just to let it ride. I said, just let it go how it goes, because if you think they're gonna cancel on Monday or Tuesday, then you can just say, well, we want the earnest money because you didn't deposit it in time and then you sent me this, which she thinks that they deposited it with title and that's why they're now scrambling to get this, because she says that's the only way the buyer's going to go through with it, which that was never part of the negotiation on their, I don't know, 3 addendums before. This was a 4th addendum 5 days later or whatever.
And that exact scenario is one that all the attorneys agree that money it was not deposited in accordance with the contract. So your buyer is in breach of their contract. Do you think your buyer is going to be happy with you if you lose $5,000 in money because you were unclear in an addendum? Nope. And it's the law.
Kim said they just had a random one that put in the EM type. The EM type was wired to XYZ title with no addendum.
Yeah, so they still would have to have an addendum. So really what that should have said is X amount in wire, and then they still need the title. Because there's things here's the thing with this addendum. So if you just say, because the other thing is people just say to deposit with title company. What does that mean, right? Title company says right here, attention, both buyer and seller are advised. The title company may require through separate written instructions that both the buyer and seller mutually authorize disbursement of the earnest money deposit, even if the REPC states no additional written deposit is required, which may result in additional delays and costs for either parties to receive the earnest money deposits. That is very clear on what happens in the event that it's held at the title company and there's a dispute with the earnest money. It's very clear. If your addendum just says wire to the earnest money, wire to the title company, or if it just says earnest money to be held at the title company, it is not clear on what happens.
That addendum is very clear. It
This
specifies
is extremely clear.
the title company. So let's say you say First American, right? Well, how many offices does First American have?
Located at,
All right, located at,
And a
and it
phone
gives their
number.
phone number. So,
and an email. So use the addendums. This is why UAR creates the addendums, because they see all these issues coming up and they go, we need an addendum for that. Okay. Another quick reminder is that they're seeing a ton of defaults on, because again, sometimes people are in a contract that they don't necessarily want to be in. Maybe they said it was non-refundable earnest money, but now the seller defaulted, not the buyer, right? What happens? Seller disclosure is a huge one that people are missing dates on. Seller disclosures. Oh, I'm going to get you the HOA information. What is the seller disclosure deadline? You better know it, and you better provide it by the disclosure deadline. So that was one exact thing they brought up, was the dates. If you are the seller and you cannot provide the seller disclosures, the full seller disclosures, who can tell us what the full seller disclosures are? Let's see how many we can get.
It's the disclosure, the PR, the HOA minutes and budget, the title commitment report, which is the PR.
Pretty dang close. So written property disclosure form. A lot of people think seller disclosures is just that disclosure form. That's not the only disclosure.
that's the one that
That's the one that
we think of.
We think of when we're thinking of that, but
But we're talking
every
leases,
single one of these things have
water
to be
share
disclosed.
documents.
Lead-based
Like-
paint, commitment for title insurance. A lot of you don't even turn in your contracts until you're under contract to the title company. if you have a listing, you need to get that in advance and get your PR so that
So
in the event you do have a quite quick seller disclosure deadline, you can send them that.
Carla, we know Amicus is pretty fast. How fast is a PR? So
48 hours.
48 hours. So that's fast, right? So if your deadline is 3 days, right? And they want 48 hours, but don't forget, there's other business in front of you. There's weekends, there's holidays.
And it
Do you know what I
depends
mean?
on if it's located out in the country, it could take longer. I mean, 48 hours is when they're like on lot 25, you know what I mean, lot 25, blah, blah, blah. If you have a long legal description, it could take longer.
So order that stuff in advance.
Yeah, it's something as simple as the plat. I've seen this come up for sure after the seller's disclosures. They get the plat, a week after seller's disclosures, and they realize there's a big easement that runs down the backyard where they were planning to put a big shop or whatever. Well, now maybe they're bumping right up against their due diligence deadline because you didn't provide, those kinds of things are important for both parties to understand.
The copy of the restrictive covenants and rules and regulations affecting the property, the copy of the most recent minutes, budget, financial statement for the homeowners association. I can't tell you how often I go, oh, I'm having trouble getting the budget, but here's the CC&Rs. Your lender needs the budget, guys. That's part of your seller disclosure, and your seller can get them. They just need to know where to get them. Any long-term tenant leases or rental agreements that don't expire prior to closing, a copy of any short-term rental booking schedules, an existing property management agreement, evidence of water rights, written claims or conditions known to the seller, FERPTA, if the seller's participating in the Foreign Investment Tax Act, and then other. So there could be specified others here. Okay, so there may be something. So let's say the buyer says, I had a buyer once put in a copy of the home inspection. Well, I'm in the seller, I'm not going to do the home inspection. So that had to be a counter. If I just called the agent and said, well, we're not going to do the home inspection, I said I would give you that, and it would be delivered on that day. By what time? 5 p.m. Also, popular topic, this got a little debated. By you uploading your seller's disclosures, which number one, we've already established are not the full seller disclosure commitment. But if you've uploaded your seller disclosures on the MLS and say, go get them from the MLS, is that considered delivered? No. And that got argued in the room. That's a courtesy. That's a pre-courtesy that anyone that has MLS access can see. That is not considered delivered. So if you're the one that's saying to hey, Claudia, just go get the disclosures. They're on the MLS. That is not considered delivered, and you could be potentially in breach of your contract. One last little quick thing here. Let's see what I have back here. Resolution of due diligence. I know you guys hear these brokers preach this all the time. This is another huge area. If there's a resolution of due diligence, use the form. Use the form, use the form, use the form, and be specific. Clarify what's going to happen, what needs to be fixed or replaced. I always use the word repair or replace, because what if I just put up repair on there and they can't get it repaired? Is it clear? It's clear if I say or replace. And then also know what the remedy for unfinished repairs is. They did bring this up. There's multiple remedies. And if the box isn't checked, or if you just check a random box, you need to make sure that is their sole remedy if the repairs are not done. So if you check the box that says buyer may cancel the rep fee in addition to the return of earnest money deposit or deposits, if applicable, and if it's non-refundable earnest money, it's not going to be applicable, except from seller as liquidated damages of sum equal to the earnest money or deposits, if applicable. Seller agrees to pay the liquidated damages upon buyer demand. That's your sole remedy now. Okay, so keep that in mind, and please be clear and specific on your repair addendum.
So
I know you guys have comments on the repair addendum.
did you want to comment?
Go ahead.
Okay, and you might disagree with me.
Maybe it will just for fun.
Okay. There is a way to use this addendum, though, that instead of just putting, like, you do your inspection, you get your huge report, they've gone over with their inspector, you've got roof issues, furnace issues, you got a couple plumbing issues, and whatever. Let's say there's 12 items. Don't put all 12 items on that form and send it over, right? Because at that point now you're negotiating it, and you're losing what the purpose of the form is, right? So the best way to do that is negotiate it via email. Okay, send over an email with your inspection report, and then if there's 12 items, say, please see item number 1 on page 2, number 3, right? And you're breaking all those 12 items down. So you send that over to the agent, right, with the report attached. Then you're on the phone with them and you're talking about all the different items.
Should we communicate?
You absolutely should communicate.
Sean, that feels crazy.
Then they're communicating with their client. And let's say out of those 12 items, what is decided on that they're going to do number 3, number 6, and number 12. Okay. You take those and you put them on the agenda. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The big implication there is once the lender sees all 12, whether the seller and buyer agree to it, the lender could very easily require all those get addressed or be resolved in some other fashion. And so now you've kind of pigeonholed your buyer to get their lender to do, and they may have to pay for these repairs or still try and convince the lender that, or the seller that if they're gonna close. I agree with Sean on almost everything, but I don't send the full report. I send snippets of it. So I do screenshots. I kind of cut out, the section 2.3, picture of the plumbing and those things. And the main reason is when I'm on the seller side, listing side, if I get a full report, I now have opened my seller that if that deal cancels, has to disclose basically everything in that report to future buyers. You've got to update your seller.
Well, when I just give my example, I was representing the buyer.
Yeah.
And I want them to see the full report.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I don't ever send the full report either.
It probably
I
depends
post
on the deal.
pictures.
Most of the time I don't send the full report, but I will say something to this effect. The inspector found 27 items to be deficient. My buyer's only asking for the following 7. And, here they are. If the negotiation gets sticky, then I might reply back, well, here's the whole report. Let's look and see what else, really
Another
that my
buyer
buyer's willing to ignore in exchange for these 6 or 7. So it's all negotiating tactic for you, but be advised on the listing side, if you get the full report, you're obligated to disclose that to your seller. And at that point, that seller has to update the entire property condition disclosure. And also don't do this a day or 48 hours before your due diligence deadline. Do yourself, your buyer, your seller, everybody a favor. So when I tell my buyers, this is more of, I guess, a coaching technique, but when I talk to my buyers, like the very first home we show, or even in my buyer consultation, I tell them when we find the right house and you go under contract, within an hour of going under contract, I want you scheduling your home inspection for as soon as they are possibly available. If that's the following morning, get it done. You've already decided you're going to buy the house. You've already committed to getting a home inspection. So just get it done, because if you wait 10 out of 12 days for your due diligence to get it done, you only have a 48-hour window. And if you ask the seller to replace the roof, they're going to need more than 48 hours to find out what's it going to cost, what is it to them that's going to make it work. So.
Okay, really quickly, I know we're running out of time. These are some important things. Know your deadlines. Know your deadlines. New construction, one of the biggest default and litigated contracts right now is new construction. Why? Because if they went under contract 6 months ago, it's worth way more money now. The contractor would love for your contract to fail because they get to keep your non-refundable earnest money or your construction deposit, and they get to go sell the house tomorrow for $80,000 more. True case. This is a real live case scenario. So in the new construction rep sheet on the bottom, it has settlement deadline to be X amount of days after buyer's written notice of substantial completion. Be aware of what this is. How many days? And can your lender perform on a 3-day substantial completion settlement? Can they perform on 7? Do they need 14? What is that? Know that and know that your lender can do it. Here's what this says. Okay, here's a true story.
But before you go into that, you got to know on this, a lot of the lenders don't even want it appraised till that's been done.
So you have to know what those deadlines are and can your lender hit them. So this is a true story. A woman had sold her family home. She was in her 80s or whatever. She was buying a patio home. She was under contract with this contract that didn't have any escalation clauses or anything built into it. The price in that community had gone up by $105,000. Okay. She had construction deposit. She was an older woman. They noticed that they delivered notice of substantial completion. Her contract says 3 days. 3 days within written receipt of substantial completion, not 3 business days, 3 days. Okay. The seller, it says seller shall provide buyer written notice of substantial completion of the residence. It does not say seller has to notify agent. Seller sent notice of substantial completion to this woman who never checks her email. on a Friday night at 6 p.m. and then went to close to do their settlement and said she was in default of the contract. Guess who won? The builder. Builder won. The woman now had the option to either pay $105,000 more for the house that she just spent the last 9 months building, or to lose her $50,000 non-refundable construction deposit. Talk about a rock and hard place, right? Now the buyer's agent's mad because the buyer's agent's like, you didn't give me substantial completion. Contract states, seller shall provide buyer written notice of substantial completion. Now, was it a super crappy move for that person to make?
Yeah.
Sure. But is this happening all the time? Also, yes. The only thing in here is about avoidable delay because you have a substantial completion deadline, because she said this is where sometimes the buyer's agent will say, no, it was a substantial completion deadline, you didn't hit it. Unavoidable delay, it says in here, in the event of an unavoidable delay, the substantial completion deadline shall be extended for a reasonable period based on the nature of the delay. And it says what those delays are. This attorney suggested clarify what the delay is. So if you're getting close to your substantial completion deadline and your builder's telling you, no, we're actually 3 more months out, clarify a new date. Because most of the time what's happening is they go, oh, okay, well, unavoidable delay, it says a reasonable time frame. What's reasonable based on that delay? So clarify it, because then if you get into issues here, you could have issues in all of your dates. Okay, good stuff, right? Really quick, just 2 things, and I'm gonna let our amazing sponsor, Legacy Roofing, talk. We talked a lot, and there was a huge debate in the room about representing 2 buyers on the same property. Caution, caution, caution. It's almost a limited agency situation. You definitely need to disclose to all. Every attorney on the panel said, do not do it. Call a friend in your office and say, I need you to represent. If Alex and I are trying to buy the same property and Sean's representing us both, Sean should call Troy and say, will you represent Alex? I'm going to represent Ressie. You cannot represent your client. Even if you're not representing the seller, you cannot represent both and give full disclosure, full fiduciary, full confidentiality. You cannot do that and not have an issue.
Yeah,
So
your
they were just
your 2
cautious.
clients, if they didn't know that you were helping someone else compete against them, they're going to be.
And this is this is coming up all over the place. I already talked about don't get creative and overcomplicate. Deadlines are the biggest area of default is seller's disclosure. So make sure you have those all delivered. And then make sure you cancel for the right reason and use your correct cancellation forms. And the one advice that they gave is stop talking if you don't have permission to disclose what is going on. So if I'm talking to Sean and he and I are talking a few days in advance and I'm like, yeah, they really are mad about the roof and this and that and blah, 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 blah. And Sean's like, well, yeah, but you guys didn't do due diligence. And we're like, yeah, I know. Okay. And we continue talking and I disclose something that hurts my buyer's position. And now I want to try to cancel on finance and appraisal. You better have some documents that are going to say that you can cancel on finance and appraisal, because this is something that's putting people in breach of contract right now. Because Sean's going to come back and go, actually, buyer's agent, you told me 2 days ago your client was mad about the roof, mad about the plumbing, mad about whatever, and now suddenly we're canceling on finance and appraisal. So just be really aware of what that is. Okay, that's it. Honestly, I don't want to scare you. No, it sounds scary.
Yes, she does.
But it is. But the reality is, you guys, you're dealing with legal contracts and you're not attorneys. And so that was like every attorney on the panel was like, use the forms, use the contract. You're not an attorney, so stop trying to pretend like you are one. And if this was the other thing, you guys, the brokerage support page that has the verbiage on a lot of these addendums. Use the verbiage provided by your brokerage if there's not a form available, because your brokers now are going to be the ones that are going to say, this is the verbiage we want you to use. Those clauses, the escalation clause, that's an example on there, multiple offers I get all the time. Those are ran by all of our brokers and attorneys. And so that's why we want you to use that verbiage. We don't want you to get creative and go create your own verbiage because you're not an attorney. If you are, then create a verbiage away. But until you are, don't do it. Okay. Also, just a plug for UAR. If you guys can make it, this is an annual convention. Next year, we'll just be at up in Park City, right? I think it's up in Park City next year. This legal panel is always super good. So start to budget and go to that. Okay, that's it.
So this little drop down right here. So this says under contract because I am in version 1 of my under contract folder. If you have a cancellation, hit add a version and it will pop up under contract V2. That just means version 2. But what you can do is, let's say this was an offer that fell through, 5711 cancellation. Did I spell? Yeah. I'll hit create new version. And that creates a whole new opportunity checklist for me in the same opportunity, so that I don't have to go back and create a brand new opportunity for the new address. It just keeps it in the same one. And then if I need to go back to my other one, I'll just hit that drop down and it goes right back to that second checklist. They both still sync with your DocuSign and everything else. So you can keep your same DocuSign room open and not have to create another one. I don't have DocuSign connected to this one, but same thing, you'll be able to upload everything in the exact same way.
Awesome.
So
I know this was something that we've been talking about because cancellations were like, well, where do we put them?
yes. So, and I get that question a lot, is do I need to do another opportunity? Some people will just create a brand new folder, but in this case, you still have your checklist, so there's nothing you're going to need. Sean reviews every single file on a cancellation, so we're not just throwing earnest money back out into the world. Sean goes in and verifies the rep C, the cancellation, any addenda that there is in the contract before anything is released. So this is just your foolproof way of making sure you have everything in there still and not having to create a second opportunity.
I love that. And that is like, so Sean is amazing and does all this for us. And there's also sometimes frustration on agents' parts where they just want the earnest money just release it.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is the brokerage is on the hook and you as an agent are on the hook for that earnest money. So if we just release it, which is the easiest thing to do, right? Just release it. It's so easy. Sean, just freaking release it. If Sean releases that earnest money and there is a dispute over where that earnest money should have gone and we've released it, then we're on the hook for that amount. Okay?
Yeah.
Which means you're on the hook for that amount.
Yes.
Okay. We're going to actually talk about that a little bit from some of our legal panel stuff.
Oh, perfect.
It's cancellation.
That's it. Any questions on that?
Does anybody have questions for Alex?
There's a couple chats.
So when you do version 2, so is that then you upload, I guess I'm confused between, and maybe because I don't know, but what's the difference, like which one is which? So if I put everything in and then it's canceled and I click version 2, does that go back into?
So
walk through, you get an offer, it comes in.
yeah, so let's say this right here, just where it says under contract, this was
Uh-huh.
my initial opportunity I created. So if my buyers were to cancel on this, or my listing had a cancellation on it, I can just go in and say, okay, that offer fell through, so I'm going to add a new version, and this is going to be, let's pretend this is my new address. I'll just
Okay.
switch back to that one, and so there's my new version, so that when Sean is reviewing those cancellations or whatever it might be, he doesn't have to try to find 3 different opportunities for all the different addresses. It's in one spot. He just has to click a drop down and switch back to that other opportunity.
And even better, you don't have to create.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of times you're using the same documents,
Yeah.
like your buyer's agency is gonna be the same on both files.
Yep. So it
But
all
they both
connects.
still need it in there.
Okay.
So I have a question. So in theory, let's say you had multiple offers
Mhm.
on a listing, could you do it? Same thing, like there's offers we didn't accept.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you could do a version 2 that was non-accepted offers and just upload those all in version 2 so that they're there.
Yeah.
They're now stuck in there. So they're in the cloud, they're connected to that client, everything's there. In the event anything ever got questioned or we had to pull up and instead of you trying to figure out where all your cancel or rejected offers are, it's all right there in one spot.
Yeah.
Alex, is there a way to change the version to a different name?
When you create the new version,
So
You'll just-
that would be awesome. So you could put canceled trend or.
Yeah.
Multiple
Not accepted
offers,
offers.
non-accepted.
Yep.
And put all, okay, very
Cool.
yeah. And
I'm gonna write it.
with like anytime you have a cancellation, I hear a lot of times it's in DocuSign. We don't look at your DocuSign. We don't have your DocuSign logins. Your opportunity is your file for the office, not DocuSign.
cool.
And unless it's submitted,
Yes.
we still don't see them.
Yes.
This is your space, your portal. Okay? Okay,
Let
awesome.
me switch back.
Let's have a round of applause for Alex.
And then that's my Calendly link. Or you can download the Calendly app if you need or want an appointment with me. I am more than happy to go over anything you want to at any point in time. We can have 15 appointments if you want to.
As many
You
as
think I'm
want. She's
joking?
here to help. Yeah.
I'm here to
And I
help.
promise she helps all the time.
Yeah.
She always has the answer.
So
And if
Or
she doesn't, she'll get it.
yes,
Or
I'll get
she'll
it.
Yeah.
So schedule appointments with me. I enjoy those appointments. I like helping you guys. So
And that's at that link is at the bottom of every one of her emails.
yes.
So you can click on that right from her email.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Alex. MCA Corner, Chris Bradford. Just gonna cut out the middle section. Is there anything in MCA Corner we needed to cover, Alex?
Not a whole lot. I've been getting asked a lot lately if we released earnest money through earnest. Yes, I've heard that is something that they're putting into process, so we will be able to just transfer that money back to your client. But right now, all earnest money is still sent back in the form of a check. So if you have a cancellation or any earnest money that needs to be released, just let me know, and then we'll take it from there. And if we need any information, we'll obviously ask you for it.
Okay, awesome. Also, I'm just gonna give a little plug for MCA Corner. If you're not using Earnest as an app, you should be using it. It actually is gonna save you tons of time, and time is money.
And it's stupid easy.
And it's
So easy.
stupid easy. So seriously, use it. It protects you. It protects your clients. There's no wire fraud. There's none of those things. So just make sure you're using that. If you thought about the time it takes, I know many of you go and pick up earnest money from your clients. So even if you just took that time and quantify it, that's saving you probably $1,000 in one transaction.
Yeah, it's most 99% of the problems are user error with Earnest. I've had like an agent called me last Friday at like 4:30 and had not used Earnest yet, and I just walked him through the process and I had the notification within 10 minutes. So it's
Super
super
easy.
easy.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Sean Janke, Troy Callentine, broker extraordinaire. You get a clap and everything.
I wanna talk about earnest money. I'm gonna give you a real life scenario that we're dealing with right now. I was pretty upset. That's probably why Chris isn't in
Sean
the
was
room right
fired
now.
up.
I was like, I don't give up. And Chris is like, well, the agent's standing here in my office. And I'm like, put him on the phone.
Yeah.
So anyway, we had an agent from Remax who showed up this
Don't mess
morning
with Sean.
to
Yeah.
pick up we screwed up my schedule. Like
And Sean is a master of his schedule.
seriously, and it's like, we got broker night tonight. So we're
Yeah.
it's nonstop till 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then it's like, do I go to the gym at 8:15 or do I go home? Like,
Anyway.
We guys are on our side.
sorry. Anyway, this is when Alex is like, I worry about what
Sean
Sean's gonna say.
This is when we need the Sean filter. You're right.
Okay, so
Wait.
here's the real life scenario. Here's the scenario. Our agent negotiated an offer, right? Which, we do. And it's a pretty good offer, goes back and forth, but one of the items is to release the earnest money, right? So it didn't get released because it probably forgot to let someone know. So now it's like an emergency. We got to release it. We get the email at 4 something, right before 5 yesterday to get it released. We go to find the opportunity. There isn't an opportunity. Now it's created. It's just not submitted to where we can actually review it, right? So Chris has gone and verified that their earnest money has been not just deposited, but verified that it's been seasoned, cleared, right? Because you can't release it if it hasn't.
Because does everyone know that a check, this is another reason to use Earnest. When a check comes in, the bank can put up to a 10-day hold on that.
Especially
So depending
large
on when you
amounts.
need to release that, especially large amounts, depending on when you need to release that, you might be SOL because we're not going to release something that we don't have verifiable funds. They're not verifiable. It will show cleared on their end. It is not verifiable until it shows cleared on their end.
So this was 50 grand, right? So you can't just you can't make a mistake on 500, let alone 50 grand, right? Because those are fighting words almost, right? You get people who want a lawyer up for 5 grand, let alone 50. So now it's an emergency. They had to do an addendum to extend it because we're beyond our 24 hours, right? Because when this got signed, I don't know why an offer was signed that earnest money is to be released in 24 hours on a Friday night.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen, right? So, it's not even, it's like the earnest money is not even collected for 4 days, and it's not even deposited for 4 more, right? So if you follow me on the time frame, so they have to do an addendum to fix it. So now at 4 something, right before 5, we get the email, hey, you guys, I forgot to let someone know, will you guys get this released? 6-something a.m., got another email. Hey, how are we looking on this? And I'm like, what? And me and Chris did have a conversation about it yesterday. So we're scrambling. This agent from FEMAX, shows up in Chris's office and says,
Filter.
no, I'm going to say it. He says, I'm not leaving until I get a check. That's why I'm like, put him on the phone. And he's like, you don't need to understand. And I was like, I don't even care. Like, this is a 3-day process for us. We'll do it as fast as I can, but don't put pressure and don't come in my staff person's office and demanding a check. That's not going to happen. He's lucky I wasn't here physically. I was pissed. And Chris was shaking. Like I could tell in his voice, he was upset. Like this agent, and he probably was just doing the best thing he could for his client, right? But you don't do that. There's a way to be professional. Now, we absolutely screwed up on it because we didn't get it released in a timely fashion. Not released from here, but we didn't get notified that it had to be released, right? So if you're negotiating those offers, give us a heads up. Don't wait till the last minute.
And that's probably where the biggest issue really came into play is even in the offer, the contract showed 24 hours to release it. We need 24 hours just to process and approve the release, let alone cut the check. Like the quickest time frame really is like 48 hours that we would want to run our.
And that's after it's been seasoned.
Yeah, I was like, and
That's
keeping
it.
in mind again, if it's a check, that is verifying that the funds are actually in the bank. That doesn't always happen even the day you deposit it. Sometimes
Yes.
it's 10 days,
And this
Yeah.
was a personal check, not a cash.
which takes even longer.
So you can, like every single person in our staff knows of this situation. And this is like, at this point, we're not even 24 hours into dealing with this. Like that's a little crazy. Now, a buyer and a seller have no clue that everyone's elevated as far as their levels of stress and aggravated. And Chris probably, did he go home? His door was closed.
He's sick, actually.
Oh, he is? Oh, I thought he was here.
He was earlier.
So like, I was pretty pissed.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So yeah, point is when you're negotiating or trying to get an earnest money release expedited, work with us and give us the heads up as much as you can. And if you're negotiating that in a contract, realize it may pin your client into a corner to something that we on the office side can't perform on. There's multiple people in the transaction working on things, and so you don't, it's kind of similar to your lender, right? You don't want to write an offer with a 6-day close knowing that the lender needs 30. They're going to look, kind of stupid, and everyone's going to be mad that you didn't perform. And so we need some space as well on those earnest money releases. The last thing we need is a dispute on earnest money come up and have us just release something and then have it come back that we didn't check. We didn't look through, and legitimately we should have released it to another party because then we're writing another check to somebody else.
By the way, this right now, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but breach of contract, earnest money is one of the biggest things they're seeing right now in breach of contract. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but that was from UAR attorneys, is that breach of contract, and that earnest money is being released inappropriately, or they're breaching the contract in the way it's collected or how it's collected. And guess what? Believe it or not, with $50,000 in earnest money on the line, do you think the seller has an interest in that potentially failing and you your buyer being in breach? Absolutely, because they can relist the house probably for more than they're under contract at.
Yep.
And they get the $50,000.
Yeah.
And this is happening
All the time.
every day
Yep.
right now at UAR.
It's no small matter at all.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it may sound harsh on our side that we have to do this, we have to do that, but think if you deposit with a title company, they have to do everything that we just talked about. In addition to get a dual party signature, they've got to get buyer and seller to release it. Then they probably have to send it to corporate to get the cut check and then out. So, for us to be able to handle earnest money in-house at our brokerage at this level, in my opinion, is much more favorable to you guys as agents in the process, even though it may feel restricted that, we've got to check it, we've got a few days, it's going to take some time. It's going to be much less frictional than I think using a title company, because again, you have to have that dual party signature. 95% of title companies I know. So.
And on that, Command does not alert us if there's something on an addendum that says earnest money to be released per this.
Yeah.
Command doesn't search your documents and say, oh, this is going to be released. We don't know unless you ping us in a note in Command or call us or email us. We're not going to get that automatic notification if you upload something like that.
What's the best way to let you guys know?
Just
Any of those
email,
ways?
yeah, like that's,
Well, the
Ping
note,
it in
I would,
command.
in the note section of the
Yeah.
opportunity, I would write it in there
Okay.
and then send something to Alex or Chris or don't do it to me or Troy because we'll forget it and not get it.
You can do an at symbol, at Alex.
Troy, at symbol Alex, at symbol
Okay.
Sean, and it tags you like it would be in Facebook or social, any of the social media channels. And then when I look in command, it pops up as a notification and click on it, go right to the file. Because the other issue, not issue, it's just, it takes time to search the address or the agent name or the client name or whatever, or the opportunity ID if we even have that info, because that's also.
So this scenario I've just given you, everything was done appropriately other than the expectation of time. That's really the hang up. That's what causes the stress on all parties because now you got like people waiting. You got, I don't know if, I know the agent was upset. Well, I don't know if our agent was upset, but I know that the Remax agent was upset because I told him he had to come back and I said, yeah, I'll get it to you before 5.
Yeah.
He didn't like that response.
And speaking of just your dates and deadlines, and it's not even just about communication and being clear with your clients. That's another thing that's a huge breach right now. If you put a due diligence deadline of 3 days thinking you're going to be competitive and you can't get an inspection done in that time, and your mentality is, well, they'll just have to extend, they absolutely do not. And that's another thing they're seeing right now all the time in going to court is were the dates the seller did not have to extend, or the buyer's trying to say, well, the seller didn't make the property available. Well, we made it available within our contract, right? So just please, please, please set expectations. I promise you, if you have a conversation with the agent and you say, hey, Sean, I'm going to release $50,000 of earnest money to your seller within 5 days of acceptance. And the reason I'm doing 5 days is because it takes time to get everything cleared through our system, or better yet, figure out a different way to do that, right? But figure it out and have a conversation. I promise you that wouldn't have been a deal killer for it to be 5 days versus 24 hours because the 24 hours was unrealistic. So unless they're going to at that point give the check, which probably is what should have happened, the check should have maybe gone directly to that seller or the brokerage or something, but then you'd have to do an addendum on where it was held. But
I know Sean just kind of grimaced there with ultimately though, as long as both parties agree,
yeah,
the consideration is whatever it is. It could be a hug, it could be a kiss, it can be $50,000. And then the treatment of that consideration
can be all three.
It can be all three.
We're seeing crazy things in contracts, which is also what we're going to talk
I'll
about.
give you a hug for $50K, let's just, but as long as it's clearly defined in the contract what's to happen and both parties agree, most of the time it should be acceptable, right? I mean, and that's the ticket, right? It's got to be clearly defined. Don't leave anything ambiguous. So
Clearly
the only thing
defined,
is
very clear.
I don't even like it when, a lot of times with new construction, you have to submit stuff right to the builder, right? We should always, always, always take a photo of it. We should scan it into our opportunity. Don't ever just give money directly without creating a paper
receipt or
trail.
something.
Yep.
This comes up,
Yep.
I bet you at least every quarter, where they're like, well, I don't have that deposit. It was given to the builder. Well, your fiduciary responsibilities is safekeeping of your client's money, whether it's to the builder, to the title company, to us, whatever. If it's involved in that transaction, you've got to keep track of what it is and if it needs to be accounted for in there.
Yep. So our opportunity is going to want to see it, and so is your title company, and so is your lender.
If the lender doesn't have it, buyer's not going to do it. So,